Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm delighted to give this update because tonight we're going to be, I'll focus on traffic and community safety, and a lot of what we're doing is related to sustainability of the environment around our laboratory. And also, I have some construction updates which are going to highlight one new high efficiency building that's coming online in January. And then I have an update on our new laboratory conferencing, Welcome Center conferencing complex that will form the new central commons for the lab. Jen, can we go to the first slide? Because this is we have three different gates to entrances to enter the laboratory. There's a Strawberry Gate, which is located on Centennial, adjacent to the Botanical Gardens. Then we have another gate called the Grizzly Gate, which is open part of the day to have lab employees enter also from Centennial Drive, more up the hill toward the UC campus above the laboratory, closer to the Lawrence Hall of Science. And then, of course, we have our main gate, the Blackberry Gate at the other end of the laboratory. But the update here is that we are upgrading, we've closed this gate and we're upgrading it because it's outdated. Now since we've opened up Centennial Bridge, we have more area around the gate to position vehicles off the road during peak hours of commute, the commute hours into the lab and out of the lab. And so this image here shows the lab's gate that is now closed, and this gate will be demolished. It's 60 years old. It's substandard. It only allows for one car or one vehicle to come in at a time. And currently the vehicles back up into Centennial Drive. And this on here, you can see some of the areas that will be improved. Can we go to the next slide? Because this is a rendering of what the gate's going to look like. We're going to move the gate closer into the laboratory, which is going to create more space for cars to queue off the road, which will help with traffic flow and improve safety. We have two entryways and then one exit. And you can see on the left, on my left, your right, that the exit is larger than the two entryways, and that's for large vehicles and emergency vehicles. The gate will be closed for it's proposed to be closed for the next 8 months, and it is going to impact our shuttle services. We've made notices to the laboratory staff on alternative routes, and also to build in some additional commute time coming to the laboratory. And what this is, the overall objective is to improve safety as well as access to the laboratory. So that's what we're doing there. And this project has been a long time coming, and it will also meet the new security standards that the federal government has for us. And as a result, right now, our existing gate is outside of our fence line. This will be inside the fence line. So that's probably more detail than you may be interested in, but this is going to be a significant upgrade for community safety and vehicle safety and traffic safety. Next slide, please. So the exciting news is that our newest science building that we refer to as BioEpic, we will begin, we're targeting to finish commissioning at the end of December, early January, and to begin the move into the building in late January, early February. The total investment in this area, in the Bayview area, has been for the redevelopment, which included creating two new footprints, one for the integrative genomics building that was completed in 2020, and then this building together with the construction of both the Integrative Genomics Building and BioEpic, is over $400 million of federal investment in the laboratory. And what I'm particularly pleased with is this demonstrates the federal government's commitment to the science that we do at our lab. We will have modern facilities. John will, he may point to the fact that our buildings are energy efficient and modern in every respect. And one of the features that is really unusual for us is you can see that we have a greenhouse on the new BioEpic building. And so this is building out a biosciences campus on the site of the former Bevatron. We have 2 additional buildings just to the north that ultimately we will demolish, and we will prepare a site for development of a new building. And the federal government is there isn't enough money right now in the federal budget for us to propose that building, but we have early plans are in place, and we're developing renderings and plans to add the 3rd building in this area for biosciences research. And this building here is one that will address both energy and environmental challenges going forward. So that's all I wanted to say about that. That's really exciting news for us. Next slide, please. And this is the last time you were at the laboratory. What you saw was a massive construction area that did not have the superstructure, the structural steel coming out of the ground. We spent the last year and a half excavating and driving piles 100 feet down to bedrock to anchor this building. And we've created 4 levels of retaining walls, as you can see here. And finally, we have structural steel being assembled. And this is the most recent image as of today. And you can see on the left, on my left, what this building will look like. Both, this is the view looking west toward the Berkeley campus and Oakland and San Francisco. And this will form the heart of our new Central Commons. And I couldn't be happier to see the steel coming out of the ground, because the most common question I'm asked is, when will the new building open? Now I can say, well, this year we're going to put up all the steel, we're going to enclose the building, and then we're going to spend the calendar year 26 finishing the interior, and we hope to open the building around this time 2 years from now. And it's going to be a conferencing complex that will also include our health services, HR, conference rooms, a cafeteria, a dining hall. And this will be a majestic place for us to host conferences and have our employees gather again around meals and coffee and enjoy the view and think great ideas, so we can earn additional Nobel Prizes to demonstrate our prowess in discovery science. So that's the grand vision, but the good news is it's moving along, and I couldn't be happier. Next slide. And then talking about community safety, Susan Wengraf, who was serving as the vice mayor at the time, invited me to participate in the East Bay Wildfire Coalition of Governments. And Mike Torkelson, our fire marshal, sits in on most of those meetings for me. I attend when I can, but the purpose behind that is to bring, so Berkeley is represented, our laboratory is represented, as are other larger entities. And the purpose is to discuss community planning and discussing safe practices for preventing wildfires in our communities. And of course, this is something that we're all very interested in. And then as we know, that it was just a couple of weeks ago that we had that fire in the hills over on the Oakland area. And that, I think that was a good reminder to all of us how quickly something can happen. That started with a house fire that then moved into the trees. So what we've been doing here at the laboratory, there's the image that you see is our building 88. We've got an accelerator in that building. That building was constructed in the late 50s. And Jen, can you move the cursor close to the building? There are 3 pine trees. Can you circle the pine trees? Yeah, right there. Those are called the President Kennedy trees. In 1962, JFK, President John F. Kennedy, came to the laboratory and 3 trees were planted. We have trimmed those trees some, but we've left those pine trees. They're very healthy. But you can see another open space. Yeah, okay, thanks, Jen, right there. And we have, on the laboratory's budget, we have removed hazard trees around the entire perimeter of Building 88. We had live oak trees that were draped over the, here I'm pointing, that were draped over the building. We removed those trees and we've created more of a fire break around that building, both on the west side, closer to the Blackberry Gate, and then up along the road leading up to the laboratory. We did that to remove not only hazard trees, but the fact that these eucalyptus trees, as we all know, are can be quite dangerous. We're still working with campus to rescope the work, the vegetation and tree reduction work that will be done on campus. More of the work will be done around campus, over by the Greek Theater and the dorms, and then up along the boundary, the UC's boundary, just below the houses up in the hills. And we're also going to, we will be removing trees, and we will also be removing the understory, the ladder fuels that can lead to a more dangerous fire if the flames were to be able to creep up into the tree canopies. So I'm very excited about that work. We are continuing. So we finished around Building 88. We're going to move over to another section of the laboratory, and that just reflects our commitment to doing everything we can using the lab's funds to reduce the fire hazard in our region. And so I know I've heard a lot from people. It is very difficult because we're removing trees, but those trees represent a threat to the community and to the laboratory. So this is an ongoing effort of our vegetation management, which, as everyone knows, includes the goat grazing, tree maintenance, and regular housekeeping to remove debris around the laboratory that could lead to a fire. And so I wanted to update everyone about this, and it has been a significant project and an investment, and we will continue doing that as part of our commitment to be good neighbors with everyone. And let's see, then we have one last slide, which is, I just wanted to alert everyone that starting on Tuesday, December 24th through Thursday, January 2nd, the laboratory is we have our annual shutdown. We will not be open, and we want all of our laboratory staff and all of our employees to enjoy that time away with their families. And so that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Michael. And we have time for any follow-up questions from CAG members. Just signal with your real hand or the digital hand, and we'll get you in on the conversation. Anything for Michael as a follow-up?
So Daniel, I have one point to make, is that we've looked at several different vendors to do this work. I would like to point out that the vendor that we selected, they have modern equipment, meaning they've made significant investments. One truck with booms and saws, tree cutting implements that are located at the edge of the boom. These vehicles are worth $1 million, and what they do is they grab onto a branch or a large trunk. They then use the saw to cut the trunk, and then the trunk is captured by the claw and then carefully moved to a pavement, and then cut into segments and loaded into a vehicle. and the contractor that we use and this is very dangerous work. They are fully committed to safety, and we pay particular attention to this because at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, there was a subcontractor working on tree removal, and there was a fatality related to a tree branch falling and killing one of the workers. So I pay particularly close attention to this. Yes, Alberto.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started in UC Berkeley. We just started a project called the Landscape Climate Adaptation Plan, because for a couple of years we've noticed that trees that used to be pretty healthy, climate change has kind of made them not be able to thrive as well. In addition, there's high fire areas now north, and uphill from campus, and obviously LBNL, it's basically almost entirely in that high fire zone. So I was wondering what you were doing to think about landscape and sort of having all these features that people really love, while at the same time responding to fire zones and climate change.
Thank you. That's actually a very good question, because we've employed an arborist and a forester to help design the tree removal areas, because there's a couple of things. Our trees are too close together, very densely populated, and if you look at a healthy forest, has some distances between the trees, but you still need an understory, because the understory, and those are ladder fuels, but there's healthy understory and then there's unhealthy understory. I'm not a tree expert, but we have used the experts to help design the approach for us to remove the trees. So we're the non-native species, the eucalyptus trees, we've been removing those. But as I mentioned, Jen, can you go back to that one image of the building 88? We have live oak trees that had grown too far over the building, and then it was interfering with the building ventilation. That's over on this, as I'm looking at it, the left-hand side. So what we did, the tree removal company trimmed back the oak trees, but they did not remove the oak trees. They just created this boundary such that the trees were not leaning onto the building and interfering with mechanical equipment. And so what we're doing at this point is we're relying on our vegetation experts to guide us in selecting the areas for treatment, and we're leaving a certain predetermined number of trees. So we're marking the trees for removal, and then we're preserving the native species, and live oaks are one of those native species. So that's, yes, we're keeping that in mind. I'm very sensitive to the fact that I've had people say, well, that's just changed our view. But if you go back 100 years ago, that view is changed by virtue of the fact that we've allowed these trees to grow in an unmitigated way. So what we're trying to do is use experts to develop a prudent plan, execute the plan, but do it in a way that respects native vegetation while removing the invasive species.
All right.
Yeah.
Umberto, did that address your question over there?
Yeah, I think that is how we're thinking about it also, and trying to communicate those trade-offs.
We're working with your facilities folks for the next stage of the CAL grant.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Any other CAG member comments on this item?
Marcos has got his hand raised.
Marcos, go ahead.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I'm just wondering, Michael, is there a periodicity of maintenance that's going on, or is this like a fluid kind of maintenance, or is it mostly related to newer buildings and infrastructure? I mean, is it a priority how this is managed?
Yeah, since I've been here, we've been doing vegetation management, actually since before I arrived, but says, as someone who's lived through 2 wildfires, I came here and I thought, I think there's more that we can do. Part of the reason why we treat the grasses, we do that annually. We remove debris around buildings on a regular basis. And then we create these campaigns. It started off with hazard trees. When I first arrived, we had a number of trees that were listing. And then 2 years ago, when we had the atmospheric rivers, some of those trees fell. So we had a program where we were removing hazard trees, but it was in the atmospheric rivers of the winter of 21, I believe, that we realized we needed to do more. So we did get the arborist and the forester here to help guide us, and we identified those hazard trees, and we remove those trees. Of course, what we want to do, this is ongoing. It's like taking care of a garden. It's the same thing. The job is never done, and we will always need to do maintenance of trees encroaching on our buildings. We trim branches, do that sort of thing. We clean gutters. We remove debris from the roofs of buildings. So it's the lab is our garden, and we will continue to maintain it for into the future, using our experts to help guide us.
Yeah, so it's very clear. I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Excellent. All right, well, let's go on to our next item. Our next presenter is John Elliott, who's Chief Sustainability Officer for the lab, and he's going to talk about the Berkeley Lab's net zero vision and the roadmap to the future. Okay.
Thank you,
John.
Daniel. As Daniel mentioned, I'm going to give you an update specifically focusing on our net zero activities. So this is our efforts and our plans to implement a strategy to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions in our operations at the lab over time. So I spoke to you a little bit more than 2 years ago in September of 2022. At that time, we had done about 6 months of, I'd say, careful net zero planning. So I talked a little bit about it then, but what I'd like to do today is just give you a sense of what's happened over the last 2 years, and importantly, what our kind of immediate plan next steps are in this area. So first, let's just kind of reorient ourselves around net zero. You can see in the picture there, that red line going down, that's our kind of performance target, a straight line reduction in greenhouse gas emissions over time to reach net zero no later than 2045. This pathway is defined by federal and University of California climate requirements, and it's very much aligned with what the state of California is doing with AB 1279, the city of Berkeley as well. And it's really no surprise. Everyone is sort of working to similar targets because it all ties back to the basic science of staying below 1.5 degrees C warming. So you can see on this chart, I mentioned, the red line going down. Some of those call outs have been some of the key federal requirements that have been guiding activities over the last 2 years. So a full electrification of fleet, significant decarbonization of our electricity grid, and then many different strategies that include both efficiency and electrification and other pieces to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our building portfolio. And you can also see on this chart, the stacked bars are our historic greenhouse gas emissions reported. And those are broken out into what we call scopes. And so the orange is mostly emissions associated with natural gas. The yellow is mostly associated with electricity. And the blue is mostly associated with commutes and flights. So what's sort of happened generally over the last 2 years? There's been a lot of evolution in direction. California issued its 4th scoping plan update since 2008. So California has been working on this path for a long time now. It's now, as I mentioned, oriented around AB 1279. So this is a net zero by no later than 2045 model. And in the state of California, that means a direct greenhouse gas emissions of at least 85% by 2045. here at the lab, we continued to do a lot of work through that winter of 2022 and 2023. And in May of 2023, we released Berkeley Lab Net Zero Vision and Roadmap. So that was really more than a year of very collaborative effort across the lab. We had a cross-lab net zero lab visioning team, which I met with monthly and were significant input into the plan, and they became initial reviewers of the plan. We had a lot of input from subject matter experts, notably in facilities engineering. We had outside reviewers like Sarah. She was one of our reviewers from outside of the lab. And so this was an effort to sort of bring together these requirements and kind of galvanize that action going forward. And I think I've very much appreciated Michael Brandt's support in this effort. One of the very concrete, small but very important activities that sort of came out of producing this was bi-weekly meetings. So we've met since March of 2023 with a group of leaders across operations and including capital planning to really fully understand especially the capital aspects of this net zero program and how it relates to all of our other infrastructure renewal needs. And those meetings have been very valuable and have pushed a lot of items forward. As well, the University of California in July of 2023 did a significant update of its climate policies and targets. So the UC had been working to climate neutrality by 2025 that had been set originally by President Janet Napolitano. And in this shift in policy, it sort of set a broader goal of achieving net zero by no later than 2045, and also emphasizing near-term direct action. So with all of this planning and the net zero vision and roadmap here at the lab, I think we have a pretty clear-eyed view of the net zero effort ahead of us. At the highest level, I like to just present it as 5 kind of net zero building blocks. So I'll just go through this quickly. You know, there's kind of 3 big interrelated infrastructure solutions. The first is efficiency, which is really like reducing the size of the problem. The second is renewable energy, or decarbonizing our electricity procurements here at the lab. And then third is moving away from natural gas over time. So moving loads that have been historically served by fuels onto that decarbonized grid. And then, of course, this all just doesn't happen behind the scenes. This is a big collective action. So there's many aspects of the vision and roadmap that involve individual and collective action. I mentioned, you know, commutes and flights are part of this as well. And we have a lot of opportunity as well for innovation in collaborating these activities with our researchers as well. Beyond this really high level, you know, 5 building blocks view, the vision and roadmap also puts forth 17 specific areas of action. And so this, over the last couple of years, has become really our sustainability strategic plan. If you care to follow up and read the plan, you can see more detail about these items. I'll just mention here, in these 17 actions, we've organized them into 3 big categories, like things that we have to stop doing. So that's like replacing natural gas equipment with new natural gas equipment. There's a lot of things that we need to grow over time, and I mentioned some of those infrastructure activities, but you can see a full list of items here of things that we have to pay attention to in this net zero transition. And then other things that are continued. These are sort of activities that we've well established in our operations, like energy efficiency in buildings or sustainable new construction, works to encourage alternative commutes and so forth that are in that plan as well. So we now are reporting our progress each year against these 17 areas, and we also put on our website what our priorities are in each of these areas for the coming year. So now I'm just going to focus for much of the rest of this presentation on sort of the three kind of big activities. These are utility and infrastructure changes needed to support net zero. These are kind of the more, sort of costly, potentially costly in some cases, certainly costly in the electrification of buildings, but areas where I just want to give you a high-level introduction to the activity, and then we'll go through a little thumbnail sketch of what we've been doing in each of those areas over the last 2 years. So the biggest cost item, sort of the critical path in this effort and the largest funding gap is the electrification of our existing building stock. So at our lab, we don't have a big central plant, but we have distributed buildings. So this is a whole series of projects over time. It's electrification of those central boiler plants. And we have 21, significant boiler plants to deal with over, a 20 plus year period. And as we do these projects, we'll also be doing some efficiency improvements along the way. You can think of this, though, in many ways as just an effort to keep up with the end of lifing of equipment that's always happening. So in our environment, we have a boiler plant that comes to the end of its useful life every 1 to 2 years anyway. The challenge here is instead of just replacing it with a natural gas plant, which is now prohibited by federal law, it's putting in an electrically driven plant, primarily heat pumps, maybe with some resistance heating to supplement that as well. A second big area of activity is the procurement of renewable electricity. And so we have kind of a unique relationship to the electricity grid. We as a lab are able to access wholesale markets, and we do it through the Western Area Power Administration. And we do it with other laboratory partners, with Livermore and SLAC. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing in that space. But this is, an effort that I think of as a transitional strategy as California decarbonizes its own electricity grid. So there's SB 100. California has a lot of activities working to decarbonize the grid by 2045. And then a third significant area of effort is the expansion of electric vehicle charging. I think of this as like just an effort to keep up with the rapid turnover in vehicle technology that is happening. And for us, we have done staff electric vehicle charging at the lab in an organized program for a decade. But this is a real shift to sort of having a fleet-driven program and a fleet-driven timeline for the installation of new charging equipment, and also working to coordinate this with staff charging, but focusing from staff charging to a fleet-driven program. And this is driven by federal requirements, but also similar requirements that come through the California Air Resources Board. It's called the Advanced Clean Fleet requirements. So I'll just say a little bit more about each of these areas. So we'll focus first on electrification of buildings. So what have we done in the last 2 years? So we've done a lot of technical studies. So we've been looking into the sort of project risks across this portfolio of 21 buildings. So looking at mechanical upgrade risks, electrical risks, structural risks, so that we can have a very informed prioritization of which project we should tackle first and next as we move forward. This has also been an effort to understand these net zero capital projects within the context of all of our other infrastructure renewal needs, like electrical distribution system upgrades or general modernization efforts. We've also been really making sure we fully understand and characterize all of our natural gas consumption. So, we've identified the 21 boiler plant retrofit projects, but then also scoped out all the other efforts needed to move off of natural gas over time. I mentioned that we've had meetings across operations since March of 2023, every 2 weeks. This has been a very valuable process to coordinate and and sort of work across potential silos at the lab. These have been great meetings. We've been doing work with our projects and infrastructure modernization group along the way, which I'll talk about. But through that, we've also sort of had a lot of ideas and consensus building around a governance model for net zero going forward, and just sort of implementation approaches, which we're capturing in planning documents to help guide us going forward. The nuts and bolts here is that we've done conceptual designs for 2 retrofit electrification projects in our buildings. And that's a step where we do a design and we do a cost estimate, and we need that within our setting to move forward with the next step, which is a decision to move forward with detailed design and construction. And our goal, our target has been to move forward with one of those projects in this fiscal year, early in this fiscal year. All right, so in the space of renewable energy procurement, when I last spoke to you 2 years ago, we were with our other buying consortium partners, Slack and Livermore. Excuse me, Slack and Livermore. I've never said that before. We were in the process of negotiating what's called a power purchase agreement with a solar developer to build a large 50-megawatt solar plant in California, hooked to the California grid. And then in this contract, we would buy the electricity from that project over a 20-year period. We eventually found that we could not come to terms on that PPA. There were a lot of ups and downs in that effort over time. We actually had started it prior to COVID. And so there was interest rates, there was supply chain issues, there was the IRA coming in and changing a lot of the investment rules. But largely, so over time, the vendors, the solar developers have sort of become more competitive, and we've determined that that model of doing a 20-year power purchase agreement is just not the best strategy. So, and that we decided we need to come up with a new approach. So we all got together, and we have been again meeting every 2 weeks across across Livermore and Slack and ourselves. We've been doing joint greenhouse gas forecasting that we've led across the 3 labs to inform a new procurement strategy. And what we've decided is, I think, very good news, is that we're seeing that the market has changed quite a bit over these last few years. And we think that we can buy renewable energy in much more easy to digest 3 to 5 year blocks. This is very similar to how we buy electricity currently. And so our current efforts are to issue an RFP. I call this a quick turnaround RFP because this is something that happens in the space of about 3 months total, to buy our first block of new renewable power, with the goal of just rolling this into our general procurement strategy and moving forward. So we're going to be getting sort of new market reference points on that renewable energy. And instead of having to do one or a handful of big projects, we can just sort of keep building in blocks of renewable energy as we move forward. In this third area, expansion of electric vehicle charging, when I spoke to you 2 years ago, as I said, we had really been focusing on staff electric vehicle charging for the last decade. So we worked with a consultant to get deeply into a fleet electrification plan, and developed a joint understanding with the group that leads our fleet of what this will require. We also sort of worked together to identify how this program would interact with our staff EV charging. And we've been just working on a lot of detailed on-the-ground implementation strategies. For instance, just how to fully charge up our existing fleet of 41 EVs in our current fleet. As well, with the projects group, we've been working on, again, a conceptual design for a 5-station fleet charging depot that's near our facilities building. And that is done at this point, and we also anticipate moving forward with this soon in this next fiscal year. So you get a sense, in all of these cases, it's been a lot of planning, a lot of detailed work, and then moving to complete the conceptual designs on these projects so that we can move forward for more detailed design and implementation. The last I'll mention, we do a lot of sustainability activities, and I've given you some updates on those in the past. I'll just mention a few of the very high-level activities. You know, one thing that we're always doing is maintaining and advancing energy efficiency. We've been able to make a lot of progress in this space over the last decade, and it really is the foundation for all of our sustainability and greenhouse gas strategies. So it's a significant contributor to that overall 41% reduction in reported greenhouse gas emissions that we've been able to achieve since 2015. We've had a significant reduction in energy consumption per square foot in our general building stock over the years, so a 27% reduction since 2015. That's been driven by those efficiency activities. We've reduced our natural gas consumption by 31% since 2015, and we very actively work to maintain a portfolio of efficiency measures that's currently saving us $1.2 million. Michael highlighted the some sustainable aspects of new construction sort of within this context of net zero. Yes, those buildings are efficient, but they're also electrified. So we have had electrified facilities since 2015, really. Building 59, Shiwang Hall, is electrified. Integrative Genomics Building, Building 91, and then as well, Bioepic, all electric space and water heating, and then the SSM facility, this multi-purpose facility with our central cafeteria is also all electric with an electric commercial kitchen as well. And we also have been putting a fair amount of effort too into refining our established waste diversion program across the site, really working closely with facilities to institutionalize some aspects of that, streamline the program, and also working with our Office of the Chief Financial Officer on sustainable procurement advances as well. So that's really all I had for you today. There's a whole bunch of links. You'll get this presentation. You can look at the Net Zero Vision and Roadmap. You can see our summary from last year of progress against those 17 net zero actions. I'll be sending out a new update in January of 2025. And you can also see our priorities against that net zero vision and roadmap for this upcoming fiscal year. So happy to take any questions or comments.
Very good. Thank you, John. Excellent presentation. Yeah, very exciting.
I see Diz
Progress
first.
being made.
Yeah.
Diz is first out of the gate. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. And John, what a great story you have to tell. You've made some wonderful progress, and I'd like to congratulate you especially on when things aren't working to change path, which you have shown that you've done. And of course, you need to continue to do that, as I'm sure you will.
Yeah, it's a long journey.
It's a long journey, and it's a very difficult journey. And I have really two questions. The first one may or may not be easy to answer, but obviously the easy stuff is now, and it gets harder and harder as you go down. How confident are you that you can actually, I mean, let me rephrase that. You said funding gaps and so forth. What are the roadblocks to you making the net zero that you want to reach?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned sort of the biggest funding gap is around electrification, but I also said, you know, we need to replace those boiler plants anyway. You know, we have between now and 2045, I mentioned 21 projects, but 18 boiler plants will come due and come to the end of their useful life. So these are all things that we're, very used to doing here at the lab and have a lot of capabilities to do that. And I think we're going through an initial phase of just dealing with the extra complexity and cost of those electrically driven plants. But we're also focusing a lot on, because we have 21 of these to do, is how we get better and do them better over time so that they become much more similar to those boiler plant, gas boiler replacements. There's nothing fundamentally that expensive about the electric plant, but it's putting a plant into a building that wasn't exactly designed for it, so it's more complicated. So I think I'm confident as we move forward and sort of try the first projects, we just have to get better over time to do it. So that's one aspect of it. I could probably talk a lot more to your general question.
To jump in with a second question, you mentioned offsets. How much of your, if any, of your calculation is in offsets?
So we're not doing anything in offsets. It's really, I don't see a great value in expending resources and sort of moving them off our site when we do have, we do have to keep up, as I mentioned, we have to keep up with the end of life equipment. And we have to, keep up with the technology change in transportation. So we have focused really everything around direct action and not doing offsets.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Diz, any other questions or comments from the CAG? Sarah, go ahead.
Sarah, yeah.
Thank you so much, John. I always love hearing what you and your partners are up to. And this one was no exception. So on that electrification of existing buildings, I didn't quite catch, are you electrifying the space heating and cooling, or is it complete electrifications as you take those on?
Yeah, I call them complete electrification. So in my mind, that means that really means space heating and water heating. In some cases, as you suggest, you could combine that with cooling, because these heat pumps can generally operate in dual modes of producing heat or producing cooling. But in general, we have kind of shied away from that due to just the extra complexity. But for some buildings, we might actually address, the cooling is already electrified. And so generally, we're talking about space heating and water heating.
Okay. Okay. And you said, so you're doing bi-weekly meetings with just curious, what sort of size and what type of group is that meets?
Yeah, so it's in practice about 10 people that are meeting every 2 weeks. It has a head of projects, it has head of facilities engineering, it has head of capital planning, and a lot of other people involved in the effort as well. We have representatives related to deferred maintenance, space planning, and so forth. So I've seen those as really valuable meetings, no matter what, just because we have a big topic. We also have people involved closely in upgrades to our electrical distribution system. So all these things have to be sort of carefully coordinated. And the kind of idea in the group discussions is to find the greatest overlap with any one project so we can address, many different infrastructure renewal needs, but it's a challenge.
Fantastic, though. Can I also ask a little about the renewable energy? Just interesting to hear that you're moving away from a PPA right as we get council approval to enter into a PPA with Ava Community Energy. In our case, it's solar plus storage. And I didn't know, was storage part of or were you just, yes, storage as well?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much everything is generation and storage nowadays, at least my understanding of the market and the reports that our lab produces every year, as generally like in the solar space, something like 85% of projects include storage. So I think that's kind of a common fixture in the marketplace nowadays. It wasn't 3 or 4 years ago, but it is now.
Okay, and you just came to the conclusion ultimately that it was not a cost-effective means?
No, it really, I think what you're doing is great. And if we could sign a PPA with Ava Energy, I think we would. It really comes down to specific terms and conditions that we have as a federal entity and that WAPA has that relate to the fact that we're not funded explicitly for 20 years. We're funded in chunks of time. So there are particular federal terms and conditions, and I think the marketplace has so much demand that they're not interested in signing our terms and conditions. So
Okay.
if you have them and you're able to execute that PPA, I think it's a good strategy. So
Okay, thank you.
Right.
That helps. Appreciate it.
Yeah, very good dialogue there, and thank you for the extra information, John. Very well done. And just to keep us on schedule, we'll move right into our next presenter, which is Anna Spurlock, a research scientist with the Energy Analysis and Environmental Impacts Division. And she'll be talking about reducing pollution and improving sustainability in transportation planning. So Anna, we're turning things over to you. Take it away.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, so I'm gonna present a little bit on some resources we've built over the last, I don't know, it's been like 8 years or something. We've been working on this. So my team and I do transportation system modeling, and in particular, we do what's called agent-based transportation system modeling. So it's a type of model that's basically, you can think of like SimCity, but like scientific. So we like model all the individuals in a particular region, and then have a bunch of modules that are estimated off of data that let us then run through scenarios where each of those households and people who are making their plans for their travel in the region for the day are kind of affected by a new technology or a new mode option or a new, transit system improvement or whatever it is, and their response to the scenario, such as those types of things, will sort of percolate through the system, and then we can look at kind of the emergent behavior, so to speak, of the resulting level of congestion in the road network and the utilization of all the vehicles in the transit system and all kinds of things like that. So it's a cool tool, and I can kind of walk you a little bit through what we can do with this and what this looks like. So let me share here. So this make sure everyone can see that. So this is the tool is called Beam Core, and what Beam Core is like I mentioned, it's an agent-based modeling system, but basically what it consists of is a series of separate models that integrate together and pass data through each other that model different aspects of the system at different sort of temporal and spatial resolution. So we model the kind of land use and sort of the outcomes that pertain to things like property values or things like that might emerge from a new scenario that relates to the transportation system. We have this population evolution module that basically takes our sort of synthetic population of all of these sims, so to speak, all of this sort of synthetic versions of the regional population. But when we do multi-year scenarios that kind of project out, a decade into the future or whatever it might be, these individuals evolve kind of year by year through their life cycle stages, and it captures a bunch of aspects of kind of household formation and dissolution and choices to have children and stuff, which all those things can affect people's choices pertaining to transportation. So whether they own a new vehicle or things like that. We have a model that models those kind of household vehicle fleet composition. So it's dynamic, kind of reflecting off of, so it kind of captures each year that it models, it's a function, the choices of a given household is a function both of the circumstance of that year, but also the state that the household's been in and is transitioning through. So they, the choice of which technologies to adopt or whether they're going to replace a vehicle or get rid of one, and all of that can be handled there. And then we use a model called Activity Sim, which we didn't actually build, but it's an open source model that models all these sort of daily transportation decisions in terms of where people are going to go, what mode they're going to use, when they're going to leave to do it, for what purposes, how they kind of link their trips together for their plans for the day. And then all of those plans sort of pour into BEAM, which is this transportation system model that models sort of the supply side of the system. So it has all of the road networks in the region, all of the transit systems, the ride-hail services, all of the sort of like options in essence that people can engage with. And then, as I say, that it's in that model where it's sort of the system outcomes resolve pertaining to congestion or other aspects of kind of travel within the system where people route their trips, et cetera. We also have this same sort of level of detail for the whole freight and delivery part of the system. So we can look at kind of shipments generation from firms to firms and firms to businesses through like e-commerce demand or things like that. And then have sort of all the last mile delivery logistics and plans for the day, all the vehicles that are going to execute those kind of enter the system and affect the system together. And then we can model all the energy consumption associated with this travel in the system, given the nature of the vehicle fleet that's operating and what they're used for, and the sort of travel that's executed by all those vehicles. So as I mentioned, we can use this as a scenario planning tool. So we can look at lots of different scenarios and sort of tweak these levers in the system and see how that impacts outcomes of interest. So lots of things that relate to vehicle technology, since a lot of our funding comes to the Vehicle Technologies Office at the Department of Energy. So there's a lot of interest in, kind of implications of like, progress with respect to the kind of cost points or efficiency of, electric vehicles or other types of things that might be of interest. Also public transit system design, as I mentioned, sort of ride hail or like on-demand mobility operations or planning, freight and delivery related, as I mentioned, traffic management strategies, land use related scenarios, and then also, things that relate to like drivers of demand. So like if there's telecommuting, rates of telecommuting by different subpopulations or things like that, and many other things. So lots can be looked at, and a lot of this can be looked at sort of simultaneously. So we can look at like combined scenarios across all this types of things if desired. And when we talk about what we mean by like outcomes of interest, we can also see a huge range, and we're kind of continuing to build into this, of the kind of implications of a given scenario we might look at in this system. So there's sort of these, what we consider kind of classic transportation metrics that are kind of most commonly thought of in terms of transportation, things like vehicles miles traveled or person miles traveled, or like we call them mode splits. So like how much utilization of different alternative modes of travel happen for different subpopulations, speeds on the road network, those kinds of things. But we can also look at lots of sort of related outcomes. So we're building in the capacity to look at, so as I mentioned, we can also estimate the energy consumption in the system of a given scenario. We can also look at this like greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. But we've been able to build in the capacity now to look at air quality emissions and health impacts. at a very kind of high resolution scale from a given scenario. And that really is important for looking at equity implications of a given scenario or planning question. We also can look at, we're kind of building in some metrics pertaining to safety and accessibility, which is sort of like a rolled up kind of impact on people's capacity to kind of accomplish what they're trying to accomplish given the collective kind of travel impedance. So like costs and travel time and things like that are all like weighted based on their preferences. So lots of things can be looked at in this system. I believe these slides are going to be shared. So there's some, additional resources you can dig into if you want to. We have this, our comms folks developed these fun animation videos that talk a little bit about these tools and what they can do that are available on our website. And then just to kind of give, I don't have a ton of time, so just to give like a couple examples of just some applications of aspects of this work. So this is one we have this model implemented right now in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's the 9 counties of the San Francisco Bay Area. We have an implementation also in the Austin, Texas region, and we're working on finalizing one in the Seattle, Puget Sound region. And we're working on kind of fleshing out these capabilities to be able to kind of be relatively readily kind of calibrated for new regions in sort of like a faster way than we can do it now. So anyway, this particular example is a scenario that pertains to medium and heavy duty vehicle technologies and associated financial factors. And this was done in Austin, Texas. So specifically what we're looking at is like, vehicle technologies, but then also like favorable or not favorable relative pricing of fuels. So like if, for example, electricity is like relatively more favorably priced compared to diesel or not was one of the kind of sensitivities. And then also looked at different like levels of these vehicle incentives pertaining to zero emission freight, like heavy duty and medium duty vehicles, and looked at a case where they expired in 2032 or a case where they were extended beyond that. And so the kinds of things, this is just like one slide of like one snapshot of an outcome from this. We have many other layers of insight from this. But for example, like the technology alone without these like financial factors resulted in a 36% reduction in collectively in energy consumption. But if you add in these sort of aspects of the scenario that pertain to these sort of more favorable financial incentives, we had like an cutting the energy consumption by over half within the system, for example. One of the other interesting things about this is that in our modeling of this, the battery electric vehicles were kind of disproportionately used relative to the amount of like vehicles that they made up within the fleet in this scenario. And that had to do with just them being like more cost effective to operate and sort of got reshuffled into different purposes in a way that made them sort of, kind of operated in terms of vehicle miles traveled more than relatively more. Another offshoot of our work, we had, as I mentioned, we had this model Atlas, which dictates the kind of household vehicle fleet and technology adoption. We were approached by the California Air Resources Board because they're updating their emissions model. It's called MFAC. And what they had is basically from SB 375, sorry, that should say 375, I'll tweak that, which dictates sort of this, mandate for zero emission vehicles and other aspects of that. From that, there was this sort of agreed upon market share projection that's statewide for zero emission vehicles. But what CARB needed to update their MFAC model was something that allocated that statewide share to specific counties so that they had a higher spatial resolution understanding of the kind of rollout of vehicles if we were to be meeting this target. So they hired us in essence to leverage a version of Atlas to do that spatial reallocation. So we have like a whole statewide implementation of that particular module that's been implemented for that purpose. And then, as I mentioned, we're kind of building more into like air quality and health modeling. We're also moving towards integrating a lot of these modules with transportation planning organizations. So, for example, the Puget Sound Regional Council, which is the metropolitan planning organization for that region, is integrating our freight modeling capabilities into their own travel demand model. And we have some other examples of other MPOs that are doing that. And we're working towards kind of building out the set of capabilities and models and data products we have to kind of support this type of modeling more generally, and sort of having a broad resource for folks to leverage. All of our models are open source and available publicly. So we try to be a public resource, so to speak, for those that engage in this type of modeling. So that's what I have for you today, and happy to take any questions.
Danielle, you're on mute, by the way.
I hate to be the first one out every time.
Yeah, go ahead, Diz. Go ahead, take it away.
This is absolutely amazing. I
Okay.
am very impressed. So I live in Berkeley and I see the buses drive by and there's one person in the bus.
Mhm.
So do you have a model to show how AC Transit, for example, AC Transit could actually make it? And are you working with those kinds of questions?
Yeah, so I mean, so within our model, we have all of the transit services in the region. We've done a study actually where we looked at, there was like a number of transit expansion or kind of improvement projects happening kind of throughout the region. And we sort of looked at a scenario where we kind of built in each of those expansions and improvements and looked at the collective impact of them. So we can look at those kinds of questions. Transit's a tricky one. I mean, it was hit so hard by COVID. Many of those systems still are trying to figure out their path forward to recover. There's lots of complexity in that system too. That's not just about the service to the customers, but there's also like, for example, like one of the things we've talked about to a lot of like transit agencies about is like, you know, there's these cool creative things we can do to look at, for example, like, I don't know, on-demand mobility, like ride hail or something like that, used as a like linkage so that you don't have to have, you know, fixed route transit that has like relatively low ridership to certain outreach areas, but you can kind of have a more core system and then have this kind of last mile kind of expansion of these last mile services in a sort of a public service way. But one of the tricky things around that is, you know, a lot of these services, the drivers are unionized. And so shifting like the routing and everything, there's questions of both, like it touches on, you know, the kind of efficiency of the system, the service to the community, the, you know, politics and policy angles that kind of run a whole gamut of things. So I think a lot of these agencies are like right in the midst of seeking, you know, how they're going to approach kind of a transition to sustaining the service they need to sustain to those that need the services while surviving financially, et cetera. So
And in addition on that, then, do you have any insight into the kinds of policy that we should support to make the system work better?
I mean, I think like, as I mentioned, I think that my main thing is, and I'm biased obviously, but using really like these kinds of tools that can look at like multifaceted outcomes, because these things all interconnect. You know, it's like you want to maintain not just the highest level of ridership from an efficiency perspective, but you also want to maintain accessibility to vulnerable or underserved populations, So there's like a lot of like like balancing out of those objectives that have to happen in this kind of a situation. I don't have like an answer.
Mhm.
So I think what we need to do is like invest much more significantly as a society in a much better transit system that just is really nice and makes it much more likely that people would be willing to use it. You know, there are models in the world of that existing. But you know, we are in an interesting, I don't know, the nature of our culture is such that that has been challenging historically. So this is one of those things where, you know, this provision of a public good is always a bit of a struggle, I think. But anyway, there's a lot that can be looked at with it though. And this idea of looking at, you know, benefits that are not just about the efficiency benefits that are, but also looking at things that relate to accessibility, that relate to equity, that relate to like air quality benefits or all kinds of things, I think can help.
Okay.
Thank you
Very
so
good.
much.
Did you have any follow-up points?
No, I just want to thank you so much for doing what you're doing and trying to get policymakers to look at the broader picture is a challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other CAG members have questions, comments? I do have one or two, and I'm wondering, are you incorporating the proposed Valley Link extension that's happening from San Joaquin County over the Altamont Pass into the connecting with BART system? Are you putting that in to show what the effects are? We're actually working with that agency, and as you know, that's one of the most brutal commutes in the whole Bay Area.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
get up at 3 in the morning to
Yeah.
go to work, to get over the Altamont Pass
Yeah.
if they want to beat the traffic snarl.
Yeah. You know, I have to look back. I'm 95% sure that that collective transit expansion set of scenarios we incorporated included the Valley expansion. It included, I think it was both that plus the plus some like core improvements to the BART service system that they were incorporating that made you know, a range of trains run faster, more frequently, things like that. So I have to look back at it because I can't remember 100% for sure if that one was included. It's definitely something we've talked about. Yeah.
And then a follow-up question to that, I'm wondering if you have looked at what would happen if the Bay Area adopted a real robust ferry boat system. There's a lot of new technology there, and there still is, believe it or not, talk of a second tunnel under the bay, which would, God knows, be $6 or $10 billion to
Yeah.
construct, maybe even more. And nobody's riding BART into the city anymore, whereas ferry boats have advanced technologically, they have electric boats. Most cities situated like we are on a body of water, such as the San Francisco Bay, it's an ideal situation for a very robust ferry boat system.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you're able to model that, because
Yeah.
it'd be a huge service to the Bay Area communities and counties that are working on these issues.
Yeah, we definitely could model that in our system. We haven't yet.
Yeah.
But that's definitely something we could incorporate.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you look at Hong Kong, for example, I mean, there's just so many cities that have that in place, and it's really effective form of transportation for the region. Okay, any other questions or comments from the CAG members? Well, why don't we give all three of our presenters a round of applause here, Michael, Anna, and John. They did a nice job here this evening. And that brings us to the last part of the meeting. We're just a few minutes ahead of schedule. And that was just before we conclude today's meeting, we wanted to get your take on potential topics for 2025 to plan out the year. We always traditionally ask those questions. And this year we did send out a pre-CAG meeting questionnaire. And we got some good responses. And I thought it'd be fun to share those and then go around the horn and see if you have any responses to either echo those comments or might stimulate some additional thoughts on your part. So with that, I'm gonna try to share my screen here. And we can review that together and then get your comments on possible topics for CAG meeting 2025. So hopefully you can see my screen there. Everybody looking good? Okay.
Mhm.
So this is what came out of the pre-session survey. Ongoing research at the lab. What is the lab doing for energy efficiency projects? Of course, we do feature that a lot, so people clearly want some more of that information. The Flex Lab is a great resource. It's a first step to a more secure grid, less demand for energy, etc. How is the lab doing this? So we actually heard some of that this evening from John Elliott, but there's always an appetite for more of that. So we'd love your feedback there. Any ideas about ongoing partnerships with Bay Area organizations in the energy or STEM space, energy programs, tips, organizations that we could link up with? Berkeley lab operations, facilities, you're becoming more resilient. Again, that's one of our themes. And I think we hear a lot of that from Michael and the projects that he describes going on at the lab. In general, somebody mentioned a ideal prioritization of topics, ongoing partnerships, ongoing research, and lab operations facilities. So again, kind of really wanting to stress the partnership idea with other Bay Area organizations. There were some specific topics of interest mentioned, pilot programs for BMS software, window inserts, especially in regards to municipal buildings. That could have very well come from our city representative. I don't know if Sarah, that was on your mind, possibly. Partnerships with partnerships with education community-based members. And other suggestions, improving our meeting process, which we're always anxious to hear more about, focusing less on technicalities of research, more on how research relates to the surrounding cities and population. So that idea of how we can tap into those research findings to benefit our region. They like the online format. That's good, especially when weather is inclement. And when we have better weather, in person is good. The person is recommending that we mask up during some of these events. And then we want to follow this suggestion, maybe a connection with other members, such as a check-in question or icebreaker activity. And maybe we'll do that, potentially at the beginning of the new year when we have the first meeting of the year, and hopefully we have new members. And in addition, we did want to ask if people knew of people out there who might want to join the CAG. If you have connections with people in these research areas or topics of interest, we'd love to hear your suggestions on any of that. So what I'd like to do is just go around the horn and see if you have additional suggestions, comments, and you could say, no, I like everything on that screen and we should do it, or add some additional points there. Marcos, do you want to start us off with any suggestions you might have?
Well, I have a suggestion of a topic, it's an array, and depends what the lab's doing or where research is headed. But I'm concerned about groundwater. So penetration, storage, clean groundwater. There's so many aspects to groundwater that we don't understand. I sit on a separate committee that as we implement more conservative approaches to utilization of water as a resource, begin to understand that state and government do not really have a clear understanding of groundwater. On that note, on an economic system as well, is like the desalinization and use of energy. If energy becomes becomes efficient financially to use desalinization, and I guess the new word would be deplastization of our water as a resource, would that take over how we look at groundwater and groundwater usage?
Okay.
If I could build on that,
Go ahead, Diz.
the water energy nexus generally. So that in the canals, we have to pump the water up and down well, we don't pump it down, but the water energy nexus. So how much energy are we using to provide water? And of course, being local, we want to know about California. But kind of generally, that would be very helpful. I would like to know that more regionally too, like US. So water energy nexus related to what Marco said, but also all of the challenges that we're facing with climate change, particularly what are we doing? What is the lab doing on carbon sequestration, carbon capture and sequestration, carbon capture, utilization and sequestration? And then building a little, again, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, but with Marcos, the consequences of sea level rise on groundwater. So
Okay.
agricultural and human groundwater use with sea level rise. And
Okay.
and that would be regionally in California, but more broadly in the US.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Humberto, do you have any suggestions you would add, or any topics that you've just heard that you'd like to reinforce as a possible topic for next year?
Yeah, I think I might have wrote this on the forum, but I remember in one of the previous meetings we uh I forget, there was a presentation that was quite technical, and at sort of the very end the presenter mentioned, oh, also we're actually having some issue getting enough students to focus on this like very niche type of technical study. And I thought that was like a really interesting sort of aspect to the technical knowledge, and a kind of an underexplored way in which different people or the different organizations in the Bay Area can kind of team up to address these issues.
Okay, yeah, we definitely have a long-standing interest in STEM education and getting students involved in these type of issues. So that could be
It seems to me
another.
that the themes, I guess I've been doing this for a year now, but it seems to me that the themes are very much resiliency, natural resources, but also population and like social governance in the Bay Area.
Okay, cool, excellent. Sarah, why don't you go next, please?
Yeah, I must say I was delinquent and did not fill out the survey, so was pleasantly surprised that so many things that were of personal interest to me were already reflected on it. So thanks all of you all who did what you were supposed to do and happened to include things that were of interest to me. One thing that I didn't see that I know I have valued learning about is I do think the lab's work on inclusion, diversity, equity, and accountability is really interesting. And it seems like it's been a year and a half or so since we've had an update on that. So I would put in a plug for that in this coming year. Personally, and I think I don't know if this coming year will be the right time, but at some point, as you have, more of these new buildings that are purely electric and existing buildings that are being electrified, hearing some lessons learned on operation and maintenance issues would be appreciated, or, just occupant experiences and the like. I would value that type of feedback. Those are some things that come to mind for me. And I do also like whoever made the suggestion of, some sort of little icebreaker opportunity when there's a little more time, in the agenda, even if it's just something short. it is such an interesting collection of people representing institutions that you bring to these meetings, and so there's opportunities for cross-institutional things in a variety of ways, and nice to take advantage and make some additional deeper connections there too.
Definitely, yeah, the relationship building could yield some interesting possibilities for the future of all of you individually and collectively as a group. Thank you very much. Savannah, why don't you go next? Any ideas, suggestions for CAG 2025?
Savannah, you're on mute.
Yes. Are you there? Okay, well, we'll come back to you. How about Gerald? Are you coming in with any ideas? You're on mute. If you have some suggestions, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, hey Daniel. Yeah, I think this is all good. Maybe I might be the minority in the room. Maybe some more educational pieces for youth programs will be good since it's Rising Sun's field of expertise there. But I think that's probably what I would probably want to represent there.
Okay. All right. And again, if you think of additional things, feel free to email us, write them in. We have plenty of time to plan the next set of meetings going into 2025. How about Shelley? Do you have any suggestions or ideas? Again, you're on mute. Do you have any thoughts to share?
Hi. Yeah, I thought all the ideas at the beginning that were shared were great from the surveys. And also I really liked Sarah's suggestion around reviewing what the lab is doing in terms of DEI work. I think that would be really great. And also maybe hearing a little bit about the K-12 initiatives, and kind of how, if any of us can, support with those.
Okay.
I didn't understand the what initiative?
I
Shelley,
think Shelley said the K through 12
Oh,
is the
thank
program
you.
that we have. Yeah.
Yes, the K through 12.
yeah, K-12 initiatives. Okay, very good. Anybody else before we wrap up, just coming back around, having heard from some of your fellow CAG members? Diz, was that a hand?
Yeah,
there?
that was one more thing. I would, both John and Anna had really good insight into what we need to do. And I would like it a little more clearly stated so that we can have insight into policy. State level and local, but especially state level. What is the policy that actually will help versus things that get in the way?
Okay, and maybe there's others at the lab tackling that very question in addition to what John and Anna are doing with their research activities and with operations at the lab. That would be interesting too.
And the insights from other CAG members like Sarah about what is going to help and what is not going to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I should mention that in CAG's past, we've had really fruitful and effective presentations from CAG members. So we put that call out again, and we can get some of our own members up in front of the group as well to share projects of relevance, things that you think would help to advance our general set of themes here. So we welcome your willingness to take that on at some point next year. Okay, any other things? Let's take this forward. We will summarize it again, and we'll get the planning process going for CAG 2025. And Jen and Maria and I will meet and talk about that. We did want to just reference the upcoming meeting dates for the CAG going into 2025. So I'm going to see if I can put that on the screen and share my screen once again. And have them written down here. Let's see. Okay, you can see that. Here they are. January 13, March 10, June 9, September 8, and November 10. So of course, we'll put this out again in an email, but we're thinking ahead, wanting you to get this on your calendars for next year, and we will plan accordingly. I do want to, again, ask you if there are any people you might know through your professional or personal contacts that we might want to reach out to as a potential CAG member. So do any of you have any thoughts along those lines? If you don't have them tonight, you can also email those suggestions in along with any other topics that you might want to see us take up next year. So anything along those lines, any people, project titles, please let us know. Email is great. All right, well, we are finishing almost close to our normal time here. We've got some good direction for next year. This being the last CAG member of the year, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays, and a safe and enjoyable end of year for everyone. And I'll just turn it back to Jen or Michael if you wanted to say anything now in closing this year of the CAG 2024. Jen?
Well, why don't I actually turn things over to Michael first?
Thanks.
Oh, okay, Michael?
Oh, thank you, everyone. I don't know where the year has gone. This has been a very busy year for us here at the laboratory, and it will continue to be so. And I want to thank all of you for your participation and willingness to meet with us, share your ideas. And I love the list. Jen and I were texting, chatting that we'll go through the list, and we'll start reaching out to prospective presenters. And we do want this to be more of a conversation. I love the idea of having an icebreaker rather than, sometimes I feel like the icebreaker. Okay, I'm going to tell you about, and then I go through it. So I love that idea. So I'm fully supportive. Thanks again for all of your support this past year. And one thing that one placeholder I'd like to offer is perhaps open the lab for a tour sometime in the spring, the summer of calendar year 26. So I'd be happy to make arrangements for that. Wish you all holidays as we go into the holiday season, and have a safe and happy holiday with your friends and family. Thank you. Jen?
Very good. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for sponsoring these events. This is really a great series of meetings and information sharing. We really value what's going on there at the lab. Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Michael and give thanks and gratitude to you all as our CAG members, especially some of our stalwart members who have been with us for many years. We always appreciate your thoughts, your suggestions, your guidance, your support. So as we head into the holidays, just wanted to say thanks again for all that you do on behalf of the lab. We're looking forward to seeing you in 2025.
And thanks to you guys for everything you do.
Thanks, Diz.
All right, well, January 13th, mark your calendars. That's our first one. We'll be sending out the dates again. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon. All right, take care.
Good night.
Looking forward to
Bye.